Compañeros, welcome to the SQL Data Partners podcast, the podcast dedicated to SQL Server-related topics, which is designed to help you become familiar with what's out there, how you might use those features, or ideas on how you might apply them in your environments. I am Carlos L. Chacon.
And I am Steve Stedman. We are two data professionals trying to help others get a better handle on their database environments, either through this podcast, our training, or our consulting practice. Thanks for joining us on the SQL Trail. Welcome to the show.
SQL Data Partners.
Hey, compañeros, welcome to episode 87. How's it going, Steve?
It's going good, Carlos. I have episode 87. Mark Wilkinson on the episode today, and we're going to be talking about the resource governor.
That's right. In fact, as I think about it, talking with another guy, one of the team from ChannelAdvisor, we probably need to talk with ChannelAdvisor and get a cut, from some of this because they've been doing so many interesting things, and we've kind of been highlighting them, if you will. It seems like a very interesting place to work with all of the features that they end up using over there.
Yes, at least that's the way we make it sound.
That's right. That's right.
and the guests.
That's right. Well, I think they do have a great team over there, although I don't know anybody else but the DBAs, of course, with Kevin Fiesel and Brian and of course, Mark and Tracy is also that we haven't had on. And I just spent the weekend with them down in Raleigh. Of course, we're recording this before I head down there, but I'm sure I'll have a great time chatting with them and hanging out with them a little bit.
Yep. What's really interesting with the group there, it seems like they all love what they're doing and they all are really good at what they do.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, we'll get into it in the conversation, but Mark actually tells us about this query tuning challenge they got at Summit. And I thought that was kind of a unique way that they ended up handling it, and they kind of attacked it as a team.
Right.
So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so our compañero shout out for today, we want to give a quick shout out to Patrick Flynn. And so a couple of weeks ago, I made a change to the podcast page, and I thought that the redirects was all straight, and it wasn't there. So if you've had problems getting to the podcast page, I apologize. But one of the other suggestions he made was, hey, it's too difficult for me. I can't remember, what the shortcut to the link to the show notes is. Why don't you just do /episode number?
Yep.
And so, Patrick, we're going to take you up on that offer and start including the show notes is, why don't you just do /episode number?
Yep. And
so, Patrick, we're going to take you up on that offer and start including. So, for example, the URL for this episode will be SQLDataPartners.com/87, just the number.
Right. But we're also keeping the old naming convention too. So if you go to SQLDataPartners.com/resource governor, it will redirect to the same place that SQLDataPartners.com/87 will go.
That's right. So if you like the numbers better, you like the names, now we have them both, and hopefully that's a better experience there for you.
So then, Carlos, am I going to be able to type in SQLDataPartners.com/25 or /13 to go back and view my older, or I think episode 13 was the first episode I was on.
That's right. Yeah. Or maybe even 12.
Maybe it's 12. Okay.
Yeah, we are going to be adding those to the older episodes. If they're not done quite right yet, they should be here in the next couple of days. So bear with us. But
whatever they may be, 85, 82 will be there soon.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that will make things a lot easier for those that are listening to the podcast and driving and thinking, how am I going to remember this, and trying to write down notes while you're in your car. Just SQLDataPartners.com/87 for this episode.
That's right. Okay, it's time for a little SQL Server in the news. Well, so it's not really news that in the 2016, SQL Server Management Studio is now a separate install from the database itself.
Right.
We've known that. And I actually found it a little peeving, I guess I'll use that word, that it wasn't there, because when I wanted to install it on my dev box or my laptop, I then had to go get another download, right? Which I didn't like. What I do think it is helpful, however, particularly if you're in an environment where you're trying to get to go get another download, right? Which I didn't like. What I do think it is helpful, however, particularly if you're in an environment where you're trying to keep people from logging onto the database server, not having it available in the install means that it won't get installed, particularly if everybody's just choosing the defaults.
Yep.
And they'll be less likely to log on all the time because they're using SQL Server Management Studio there. They'll have to use it from their own machines. What the news part of it is that the SQL Server Management team is now releasing new versions every month. And it was interesting. I've been using the 2016 version of Management Studio, and I hadn't seen an update. So almost like your Windows updates, you're going to get a notification saying, hey, by the way, there are new updates. And lo and behold, today when I opened it in preparation for this podcast, it said, hey, you've got new updates. So I said, hooray, team.
Into a SQL Server or a system that I haven't been on for a couple of months, or I'm checking back on for a client or whatever it may be. It seems like you get there and it's telling you immediately there's an update available because nobody's run that update for a little while.
Right.
So I like it because we're getting new features and changes more often, but I also kind of dislike it because it seems like it's always nagging you for an update.
Yeah, there is that as well, right?
Yep. So pros and cons to both sides of it.
Exactly. And we've put out an invite to the project manager at Microsoft for the SQL Server Management Studio group. And he'll be on with us in a couple of episodes. The date's not entirely clear yet, but another month or so, we should have him on the program.
So maybe between now and then with the guests, and they mentioned the one thing they changed about SQL Server, maybe we should round up all the things that people say that they would change about Management Studio so that we can bring those up.
There you go. That's a good point.
About SQL Server, maybe we should round up all the things that people say that they would change about Management Studio so that we can bring those up.
There you go. That's a good point.
Not to put them on the spot.
No, of course. Because they are doing good things, and they have mentioned some of the new wizards and features that they've tried to improve with the new features that have been released. And so there is some neat stuff. One of the things I know I want to talk with them is kind of that backwards compatibility idea, and should we be using 2016 to manage, or the SSMS 2016 to be managed the older things, and what does that get for us?
Yep.
So.
And it's definitely nice to be seeing some improvements there, because it seemed like for a long time there would be very long stretches with no improvement there. So
that's true.
So thumbs up on that one.
That's right. So the last detail we want to take care of before we get to make this happen.
Yes.
And so we don't yet have a name for the conference. And compañeros, if you have a name that you think would be interesting, we'd love to get your feedback. But we're looking to put on something for kind of catered towards the accidental DBA or those who have database responsibilities plus something else.
Yep. And what's interesting with that is that, if you're a full-time DBA and all you're doing is SQL Server every day, like some of us, you have a very different need or interest when you go to a conference as to what you're going to attend or view than someone who might be a 50% DBA while they're doing 50% other IT work.
Right.
And I think that that's part of what we're going to take a look at here is how can the sessions that we present be targeted more towards those people who are not full-time? How can the sessions that we present be targeted more towards those people who are not full-time DBAs doing SQL Server all day and every day?
Exactly. Yeah. And to help build, that community, we are going to cap attendance with the idea that at the end, we're going to know most of the people at the conference, and we're going to have a network of folks that we can reach out to and ask questions after we've gone home.
So then with that attendance cap, if somebody waits to the last minute to register, we may have to tell them, sorry, we're full.
That's right. We're full. That's right. So I am hopeful. It's not, we're looking at, and again, the numbers will come out a little bit later, but we're probably looking at capping the attendance at 50 people. So it's not going to be a huge crowd. That's also going to enable us to do a couple of fun things that we, again, that will be forthcoming here. But we're looking forward to that. Of course, if you'd like to indicating that you're going to come, but just that you're interested, want to know more, or you have some feedback for us, that would be good as well.
Yep. And that's one of those things I think that whenever you go to a conference, oftentimes the people you meet and those relationships you build can be as important as the sessions you attend. And that's one of the reasons we're capping that, is to be able to keep it small so that you really get to know the people there.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. So we're excited. Again, more details will be coming, and we're looking forward to it.
Yep.
With that, should we go ahead and jump into the conversation with Mark?
Yep. Let's do it.
Okay. So Mark, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, it's nice to have you back after a good amount of time being with us in episode 14. Today, we're going to be talking about Resource Governor, and always amazed at you guys over at Channel Advisor using all the cool toys, it seems. All the cool toys, it seems. And
well, the cool toys. It's kind of Resource Governor's a little bit old, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, but I guess I'm impressed at all of the features that you've been able to implement in regards to SQL Server. And Resource Governor is another one of those features, and that's kind of the topic of our discussion today.
It seems like with Resource Governor, it's one of those things that people either know, use it, and love it, or they don't know an awful lot about it and have never tried it. There's not an awful lot of in between there in the people I've talked with.
It's funny, actually. We were in Redmond for a week in Microsoft's labs doing some testing. Part of the gig when you go there is that you have to talk to their, the SQL developers and tell them, things that you like, things that you don't like, and stuff like that. And when we listed the features that we used, there were some features on the list that we had to explain what they were because they were so we're like, oh yeah, we use CMS, and people are like, what's a CMS?
Right.
Central Management Server. Yeah. So the people definitely knew what Resource Governor was, but yeah, we use a lot of features, and there's definitely some stuff in there that not everybody's aware of. So yeah, I like to tell people about Resource Governor because we've gotten a lot of use out of it, and some neat kind of things we didn't expect came out of it as well.
Well, I think the classic scenario, and ultimately, I guess, so definition of Resource Governor is it allows you to manage SQL Server resources and workloads by putting limits on what either logins or users, applications can use and have access to. Right?
Yeah. And anything that's basically related to the session, so like you said, like the application name, the user, there's a lot of different things you can classify on, but pretty much anything to determine which group something gets classified into and what kind of limits get put on it. When I had mentioned that there were some kind of neat side effects, things we didn't expect, the monitoring capabilities, not really capabilities, but the metrics you can get out of Resource Governor are kind of amazing. Really, it keeps track of anything that goes through each of the workload groups, from CPU time to amount of reads and writes, IO operations issued, just total number of requests, all kinds of things like that.
And you don't always have limits on those. It's just keeping track of them because it's part of the session.
Exactly.
Well, so then why did you want to implement Resource Governor?
It kind of came up because we were having issues where a certain, actually it might make sense to kind of go up a level higher and to talk very vaguely about our architecture at Channel Advisor. It's not going to seem that of SQL servers, and then we have got a set of application servers, and basically any team can submit work to these application servers, and the work is kind of divvied out, and all of those servers communicate with the database instances. That being said, we don't have a lot of control over how many requests can be made from a given application server or set of application servers. So we were starting to run into situations where maybe one team was using all of the instance, and there wasn't really much left resources-wise for anybody else to use. So we had to find a way to kind of limit that, reduce that a little bit, and that's where that's when we started using Resource Governor.
So these are actual teams then. So you kind of separated by team or by, I guess, application, or by login.
We're very strict in our application naming. in the connection string when you connect.
By team or by, I guess, application, or by login?
We're very strict in our application naming in the connection string when you connect to SQL. So any application that communicates with any of our instances should have, I say should, we would love it if all of them did, but sometimes things slip through the cracks, but they should all have an application name associated with them, and the team name is part of the application name. So, team A, their application might be team A, file processor or something like that. So we can use that application name then to push them into the team A workload group.
Okay. So if somebody's listening now and they're thinking, I want to give Resource Governor a try, what do they need to know about SQL Server versions or editions or anything like that as far as trying it out?
So as long as you're on a version 16 has all the new bells and whistles, and that's kind of good to mention as well. It's not one of these technologies that seems like it's going to be going away. I would imagine they probably use Resource Governor in Azure to kind of separate workloads, if you're using like the Azure database or something like that. But they've been adding features to Resource Governor as of SQL 2016. So it's definitely something they're continuing to work on. At a minimum, you're going to be able to put some limits on CPU, memory, and then the concurrent requests. Concurrent requests is actually where we started. Like I said, we don't really have a lot of control over the amount of work that's coming from our application servers and hitting the database. A lot of it's customer driven. So the way that we originally kind of went at it was that we would reduce the concurrent requests per team so that everybody had some resources to use there. Once you get into later versions, you can start doing things like limiting I/O. So you can set minimum, maximum amount of I/O. And that's operations per second. So it's not like you can't limit throughput or anything like that. Just the number of I/O operations per second.
Okay.
Right. And start creating additional bottlenecks, right? You're like, you can only return this many records.
Yeah. One really actually kind of neat thing you can do. Were you guys, I can't remember because it was kind of a whirlwind, but you guys were at PASS, the summit, 2016, yeah?
Steve was. I was not.
Yep. Steve was.
Yep,
so SanDisk had a query challenge set up where you had to make this query run as fast as possible, but you couldn't actually touch the query itself. You could only do things to the instance. You only had, I think, 5 minutes for your changes to be done. So you won that competition by using Resource Governor. One of the things you had to do was one of the things that would really help performance in that case was rebuilding indexes, but there wasn't really enough time to rebuild all of the indexes that you needed to. But using Resource Governor, you can set NUMA node affinity. So we actually just dedicated a few CPU cores per index for the index rebuilds. So there's a lot of really weird and interesting things you can do with Resource Governor if you take the time to learn it all. NUMA node affinity is definitely one of those kind of edge cases that helped us there. I don't know where you might use it in production, but it was kind of a neat application of Resource Governor.
Yeah. So next year on your PASS.
Yeah, we might have to pull out some new tricks next year.
Okay, so then, given that it's been around since 2008, is that available on all? Okay, so then, given that it's been around since 2008, is that available on all editions of SQL Server, or is it an enterprise-only feature, or who's going to be able to use it there?
Unfortunately, it's enterprise only. I'm lucky enough to work in a shop where we use enterprise, so that's not a problem for me, but it is an enterprise-only feature.
Okay.
Yeah, it was interesting. And chatting with, actually it was Jessica Moss, and they were talking about the 2016 Service Pack 1 and how that was kind of opening up additional features. And taking a quick peek here, it doesn't look like that one got opened up with the Service Pack 1.
I can remember when that Service Pack 1 announcement came out, there were some people griping and wishing that Resource Governor had been included in Standard Edition after that. But I think that it's not there yet. But maybe one day, who knows?
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, even if they could release a subset of the features, I think it would be useful for a lot of people. One, actually, this is a super, but it's been kind of useful. When you implement Resource Governor, you set up what are called resource pools, and then within each pool, you set up a workload group. The workload group is where the actual requests get categorized to. But for every pool that you create, it gets its own plan cache. So you can actually use Resource Governor as a way to kind of partition your plan cache. So cases where that might be really cool is if you've got, like we do, where you've got multiple teams executing procedures. They might be running the same procedure with completely different parameters and causing some weird parameter sniffing issues. But as soon as you kind of partition the plan cache, those types of issues can go away. So that was another kind of neat side effect of implementing this.
Interesting. Now, you say they can go away, but it seems like it might also hide them a little bit, where if you have one plan that's having parameter sniffing issues that's only for one group of users, that might be more challenging to track down.
Yeah. It all depends on your workload, obviously. And if somebody messes up and changes their connection string or does something weird that stops their work from being classified properly, they might get dumped into the default workload group or something like that. And you can see some issues there as well. So yeah, definitely when you're using Resource Governor, make sure that whatever you're using to classify your workloads is something fairly stable.
Well, so then what did you guys start with? I guess take us down that journey and let's talk about, I guess you mentioned setting it up. What were the first steps and how would you recommend people going about setting up Resource Governor?
I think I said anyways. We kind of mentioned you don't have to set up any limits when you're using Resource Governor. So I think a really good first step you can take is workload groups and create your classifier. So the classifier is it's a function that lives in master, and it is executed for basically every request that comes into the box. So you do want to make sure that it's a pretty efficient function because it's going to be ran a lot. But So yeah, if you're just getting started, you want to see if this is something that you want to use, you could just set up the pool and the group, get a classifier that starts, classifying work into the various groups. And
now you mentioned it should run efficiently. I thought that was going to be like something that I just chose from setup. How am I going to choose an efficient one?
Oh no, yeah. There's definitely nothing built in. You're gonna have to write it from scratch.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so when I say efficiently, just make sure you're not doing any extra work. There are some limits on what you can do in the classifier function, like it's schema bound, so you can't access objects outside any extra work. There are some limits on what you can do in the classifier function, like it's schema bound, so you can't access objects outside of master.dbo. So I think that's actually there just to stop you from hurting yourself.
So then, just to back up a second, was that a stored procedure or a function that you said you put in there?
It's a function.
Okay.
Yeah, the classifier is a function that you define.
I feel like I just found the reason why more people aren't using Resource Governor.
Yeah, that could be it.
If you have to be building that function to do that for you, I feel like that's going to be a big hurdle to jump through.
So it's actually not that hard.
Okay.
The function has one job really. So when a new request comes in, the Resource Governor classifier function looks at that request, looks at some different parameters of that request. So for example, there's a few variables that are set up. Example is one that we would use. So for your classifier function, you would just look at app_name and then set up a case statement. That's what I like to do. You could do if else, whatever you like to do there, but really all you're doing is writing code that would look at that application name, figure out what group it belongs to, and then just return the name of that group. So that's all the logic there really is in your classifier function. Its one job is just to return the name of the workload group that this work should go into.
Okay. So when the session comes in, it says pass in the app name, and then I'm going to tell you what group you belong in.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, application name is just one example. There's a lot of different things that are available to you. Like username, for example, is another good one. So if you've got like maybe you all this stuff coming from your application tier, you do want to categorize into these groups and put limits on them and all that. But if something comes in from the the web interface, to be unlimited and not have any limits at all.
Okay. So then you've got your classifier function set up and it's sitting there in the master database. And then how do you go about using that then through the resource governor? All right.
So when you are configuring is kind of configuring is a little bit too much of a big word to say when you're dealing with resource governor. When you're initially setting it up, to enable it, you just run alter resource governor reconfigure. That's all. It's running then.
Okay.
It's not classifying anything, but it's running. So then you run another alter statement where you just set the classifier function, and that's it. So once you specify the classifier function, anything that's coming into the instance is going to run through that function. So actually getting it all set up.
We still don't have limits here.
No, there's no limits here. So what you have right now is basically the metrics on your various workload groups. There's a few DMVs you can look at for this information, but it will show you the total number of requests that are coming through, for instance. So if you were just interested to see, how much work all of these various groups are doing, all of that is available to you.
Right.
So,
and
like
I think that's a
CPU
great
time.
suggestion.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's a good way to get some insights into your into what's going on your instance without really having to do tons of. You could probably get this running in maybe 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah, but it's baselining, right? I want to baseline my system, and then I'm going to start making some tweaks.
Exactly. One thing to mention too is that those DMVs are cumulative. So as requests come in, the number just goes up, right? So if you want to monitor it at all, you're going to have to, like I do, you're going to have to set up a table, and then just store the deltas in there from last time you looked, kind of thing.
Can you purge those or reset them?
So I know you can reset them, obviously, like most things, when you reboot the instance or restart the services. Right. I don't know if there's any like DBCC functions you could use to clear that out. One of the DMVs, though, which is kind of interesting because I don't know if many DMVs have this, but one of the DMVs that will actually give you a date of when things were last cleared. So you kind of how long it's been gathering statistics.
Right. Yeah, I can't think of another DMV that does that for me.
Yeah. No, I can't think of one either. So, okay.
It'd be nice if they did, but yeah.
Right. Yeah, especially those index ones. They were having problems like the index would get rebuilt and then the counts and whatnot would get cleared.
Indexes, weight sets, all those. It'd be very nice.
Can you then maybe elaborate a little bit more on sort of the idea of resource pools versus workload groups?
This is kind of a piece of over-engineering, in my opinion.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I like to think of this as kind of like a hierarchy, right? So you've got your SQL Server. Underneath that, you've got resource pools. And then underneath that, you've got workload groups. The theory being is that you could have a resource pool with multiple workload groups in it. I've never seen anybody implement it like that. I don't implement it like that either. I usually just do for every, again, we'll go run with my example of teams, right? For every team, they'll have a resource pool and a workload group. The difference between the two is just what kind of limits you can set at which level. So at the resource pool level, you can set limits on the minimum and maximum CPU that can be used, the amount of memory that each request can use. That's where you can set your I/O caps and your NUMA node affinity. And then below that, at the workload group, is where you can set like max CPU time in seconds. So not percentage, but actual time. You can also set up the concurrent request limits at the workload group, and then also max stop at the workload group. So there are different things you can set at each level, but like I said, I've never set it up where I'm not doing a single pool with a single workload group in it, for all the various types of work that I want to classify.
Okay. So then once you've done the classifier function and you have things assigned to the appropriate resource pool and workload group as the connections come in, have you ever run into any issues if you limit something too much that it causes our bottlenecks waiting on that?
Oh yeah, that's always a big risk. We've had issues.
And almost by definition, you're asking for that because you're now saying in the example of this reporting services query or whatever that, hey, I don't want you to be taking be such a hog. So that means you're going to have to take a little bit longer, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. And if you're in the kind of place where you've got a lot of different applications hitting your instance, but none of them are really aware of each other, and you slow one of them down and it starts holding locks or something for longer than it was before, yeah, I mean, it can cause havoc. It's always best, in my opinion, with Resource Governor to start with very high limits that you don't think you're really going to hit right away, and then kind of walk it down a little bit until you find a nice, comfortable place. But yeah, it's always a risk when you're implementing something like this that you could wreak havoc for other people trying to use your server.
So we talked about implementing it in production. Do you have
that you could wreak havoc for other people trying to use your server?
So we talked about implementing it in production. Do you have this in your lower environments as well?
Yes, we do. So if anything, it's awesome on your development environments to implement this with no limits because of all the reporting you get. One example that I like to give people, because it kind of helps it kind of sink in. At any given time, I can tell you exactly how much CPU time one of our application teams are using on any one of our instances. And that's all using, just stuff built into SQL. It's not some special monitoring I've got at the application layer. Just with Resource Governor, I can tell you, what percentage of CPU time was spent by what team in our, in our development environment. And that's really powerful because then you can go to that team and be like, what are you guys doing here?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's really interesting because in my experience with developers griping about why it's so slow. And oftentimes it's because there's just not enough hardware and horsepower there basically to service everything the developers are doing. But if you could come back and say, well, it's slow because this team over here is using 90% of the CPU, that might give some interesting insight into who should be paying for the upgrade on that SQL server.
Exactly. Another kind of good thing you can do with Resource Governor is you can kind of slow down bursty workloads. So this is also common in development environments, right? Your QA tests, automated tests run at, midnight every day or whatever. You can set up limits on like concurrent requests, for example, so that, when those tests start running at midnight, it's not going to take everything else down with it. It's only going to be able to, maybe execute 3 or 4 requests at a time, and everything else will still be able to run as it was. It might not run as fast as it was before, but it'll still be able to actually run.
Right. And those normally...
Yeah, they'll be able to actually run.
Right. And those normally aren't performance tests anyway.
Yeah.
Can this execute and will it complete successfully?
Yeah, does it work? Yeah. So when you're in those types of situations, it's really a great tool. And you can kind of get more out of your lower resource instances because things are restricted a little bit more. They can't hit it as hard.
So can you share with us maybe a little bit more around the monitoring of the stats or the DMVs or the to better understand like where someone would go to start learning about that piece of it?
I mean, not to self-promote too much here, but I've actually got a blog post on just this topic over at m82labs.com/resource-governor. I've got a whole post on even though down to the procedure you would set up to gather the statistics. But I can walk you guys through what I do. Might not be for everybody, but what we do in our environment is I want to say it's every 5 minutes I do this, but I've got a table set up that stores, it's got a column for all the different, all the different stats and things that I'm interested in. Every 5 minutes, a procedure runs that grabs the latest data from the DMVs, inserts it into the table, and also uses the existing data in the table to calculate, the delta, the change in all these different statistics since last time it ran. And then I push all that information into Elasticsearch. And then from there, we can, graph it out in any number of tools. And that's our primary way of kind of visualizing how things are performing in most of our instances.
Interesting strategy there. And any other links that we might reference here, we'll have available on the show notes at SQLDataPartners.com/resource governor.
One thing to mention too, and this was kind of surprising, not to rag on Microsoft or anything, but the documentation for Resource Governor on Microsoft's page is amazing. They've got very in-depth documentation on every aspect of configuration and what all the different DMVs are for, what the different fields mean. So this is definitely one of those cases where I'd head over there too and take a look. It's wealth of information there. They even give you some kind of like example scenarios where you might use it. So it's very useful.
So as far as then other scenarios that you might have seen where the reasons that people are using Resource Governor, maybe a little bit of background story or more information on like why people are using it?
Honestly, I haven't ran into a whole lot of people that use it. Yeah, I mean, for our use cases, I would imagine our use case for outside of the monitoring piece. But yeah, I haven't really seen a lot of people that are using it. I'll see the occasional talk at like a SQL Saturday on it, but yeah, I haven't really met anybody else that uses it. That could also be because it's an enterprise feature and not everybody runs enterprise.
Right. Now, you said that in the classifier function that you were using the login name, which is how you identify who's on which team or where.
Well, both actually. I use the app name, and then in some cases we use the login name as well.
Okay, the app name and the login name. Okay, so even if someone's using a shared login amongst multiple applications, you can use that app name to be able to classify it appropriately based off of where that app's coming from.
Exactly.
Okay.
There's nothing special about the classifier function, really, how you're writing it. So you can do things like, where app name is like this or, things like that. So you've got pretty much your full range of T-SQL that you can use within the function there.
Okay, so any gotchas
you want to make sure that it's not too expensive.
Right. So any gotchas that you've come across or anything that like you just tried it out and things went really bad and that people might want to know about before giving it a try?
Yes, definitely. So the kind of, there be dragons here kind of scenarios with Resource Governor is you want to make sure that you're really, really read about the different limits you can set because they may not behave how you expect. Max CPU is a perfect example. Like, what would you expect max CPU to do? If you set max CPU to 50%, you would expect that whatever's in that group can only use 50% CPU, right?
Sure.
That's not the case. How it's defined is that in cases of CPU contention, it can only use 50%. And how CPU contention is defined is kind of a mystery. I'm not sure. I've never actually found a good definition, but it sounds like if there's other workload running on the box, it will try to make sure that this can only use 50%. But if this task comes through and that's being, governed, if it's running in the middle of the night when nothing else is going on in the box, it could still use 100% of the CPU, even if you've got that limit set. So that was
so there's almost like a tapering effect, right? So my process is running 100 miles an hour, and then somebody else wants to come onto the track. Okay, well you got to slow down, and so this guy can speed up, kind of a thing.
Exactly. So it can definitely still be useful, but if you're expecting it to just hit a hard ceiling at 50%, that's not going to happen. That being said, in a later version, they did add a CPU cap that you could put on that would do just that. So there's actually a minimum CPU, max CPU, and then a cap. So there's 3 different values you can set.
Source pool with a max of 50% CPU, but there's no other load. I might be able to use upwards of 100%. But then if I have a long-running job on that connection that maybe runs for an hour, hopefully not, but let's say it does, and someone else comes along and says, I need 50% of the CPU, or, well, they don't say it that way, but they connect and start using CPU, is it then going to take my existing connection that was using around 100% and squeeze it down to 50%? Or is that only going to apply to new connections?
That I'm not sure. I could definitely see where it would have the opportunity to limit it, right? But I'm not sure. I'm not sure what happens to existing, existing stuff that's running. That's another thing I would have to test. There could be a whole blog post just around the various behaviors of these things. Another interesting one is you can set the minimum and maximum I/O. Another thing I would have to test. There could be a whole blog post just around the various behaviors of these things. Another interesting one is you can set the minimum and maximum I/O. So it will actually limit the number of I/O operations that can happen per second. But I have found in my testing that even if I set the max I/O to something that is impossible, like 10 million to 20 million operations per second, even when I set the limit that high, there's still I/O operations that are being throttled based on what the DMVs are showing. So that's
interesting.
That's something I'm going to be looking into further, but that's really why those metrics are important to look at. So even if you think you know what some of these limits are going to do, I highly recommend people set it up in a test environment and even run some load tests against it if you can, if you've got that kind of setup, and just see if the DMVs are responding how you would expect. Because the I/O thing I didn't expect at all, completely nuts, and something you're never going to hit. It actually opens up another DMV that you can look at that will show you the I/O operations per volume per workload group, which is really cool because if you've got tempDB on a different volume than your data files, you can actually look at tempDB utilization per workload group using that DMV. But once I started seeing that, it's limiting the I/O even when it shouldn't, I kind of got a little nervous about that one. So it's going to take a little more research.
Yes, that sounds like a caution flag there.
Yeah, definitely. And that seems to be the case with a lot of these. There's just these little weird kind of gotcha scenarios where you might want to do a little more research. Fortunately, though, like I had mentioned before, the Microsoft's documentation on this actually covers most of these scenarios. Max stop would be another interesting one. You can set a max stop for a workload group that's higher than the max stop for the instance, and it will go ahead and it'll honor that, right? If there's a request that's coming through that manually defines a max stop that's higher than what the group is, it will not honor that. It will only go up as high as what you have set at the group level. There's a lot of like tweaks and things you can do, but just got to read and see how it gets applied. If you're using like a developer edition, since obviously this is an enterprise feature, it should be available on developer edition as well. So even if you're not going to be using it in production because you're running on standard, if you could get it on your development environment, it could have a lot of use there, even just from the reporting aspects, and also potentially from being able to kind of throttle your workload a little bit, so that maybe you can get a little bit more use out of those testing instances.
So should we go ahead and do SQL Family then?
Yeah, let's go ahead. I'm pretty much your standard accidental DBA. I was in a company, and the DBA left. There was really nobody else left to fill the shoes, so I kind of stepped up and started learning about about SQL Server. I want to say we were running on SQL Server 2000 at that time, and I've just kind of stuck with it ever since.
So if you could change just one thing about SQL Server, what would it be?
I'd be interested to see what listeners have to say about this one, because we would have a use for this feature at ChannelAdvisor, but when we talked to Microsoft about it, they weren't. I don't know if they were entirely sold on the idea, but we would desperately love to have a query hint called not index. So instead of forcing an index, you could actually force a query to use any index but this index. We've got a lot of cases where we've got an index. We've got a lot of cases where we've got an index that's been created for a very specific purpose, but other queries will pick it up and start using it, and whenever they do, performance just tanks. So
sure,
if we
because
get
you're
this
grabbing on the locks on that index.
Well, not even that. It might just be the index might just not be that great for this other subset of queries. But works
really?
Really
but the
well.
optimizer still picking it.
Yes. I don't know why it's picking it, but yeah, we do have cases where the optimizer will pick an index. We'll hop on the box to see what the issue is and be like, oh, this index again. Great. So, but you can't get rid of it because there's a lot of queries that actually benefit from it. So
right.
A not index hint would be fantastic.
So basically a way to say take whatever index you would normally pick, but exclude this from your list.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. That would be interesting.
Yeah, we would love that.
Interesting.
Yeah, we would love that.
What's the best piece of career advice you've ever received?
So I thought about this here, and I honestly haven't received a whole lot of career advice directly, but indirectly, just from kind of observing a manager that I had previous years. I think that what I could take away from that experience with him was to always say what you mean and always ask for exactly what you want. So, don't get caught up in the, kind of the games, the political games that happen in the office. Don't get caught up in the, kind of the games, the political games that happen in the office or, wherever you happen to work. Just always make sure people know how you feel about stuff, and always be honest and kind of straightforward. Even if it doesn't always work, I think in the long run, it's definitely a good advice to follow.
If you could have one superhero power, what would it be and why would you want it?
I don't remember which superhero this is, but there might even be a few superheroes that have the ability to kind of duplicate themselves. Like I may have mentioned before, I've got 4 kids, so it's usually pretty hectic around the house. If I could duplicate myself and get some more stuff done around the house, that would be fantastic. And then, of course, we've got, SQL Saturdays every weekend, all kinds of conferences and all that stuff. So, yeah, duplicating myself would be very, very beneficial.
How many SQL Saturdays could you go to if you could duplicate yourself several times? That would be interesting.
Yeah, the mental strain, I guess, of concentrating in all those different places. It's also interesting as I think about duplication. It seems like, and again, this is just from my limited experience, that villains generally that have the the duplication ability are always using it for nefarious purposes, right? So to have someone to actually be able to use it for noble purposes would be a change of pace there, I think.
There we go.
Yeah. Well, Mark, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Thanks, Mark. Definitely some good information about Resource Governor today, and thanks for being on the show.
So one of the takeaways for me, well, I guess one, that there's quite a bit of server when you connect to SQL Server. And so I thought, that was, again, kind of another indication of there's some policy set up that helps them manage and use this feature a little bit better.
Yep.
And so again, one of the things that continues to kind of come up is culture and policies, if you will. And this is another way how kind of getting everybody on the same team is going to allow you to help them better.
Right. And that's an area that the application name in your connect string is optional. And it's one of those things that when you first start connecting and using a database connection, if you're using Management Studio or something like that, you're going to have that name in there already. But if you're writing code to access the database, it's just an optional parameter you can specify. And I know, for instance, when I started working on Database Health Monitor, probably the first year that I worked on that, I didn't have that application name in there. So it made it hard to try. And I know, for instance, when I started working on Database Health Monitor, probably the first year that I worked on that, I didn't have that application name in there. So it made it hard to track down what the application was doing. And I came back later and added it in, and it made it a lot easier for people to see what's going on in the application.
There you go.
So, yeah, I think
so a good piece of feedback, right? To take back and say, hey guys, again, let me help you, but we're going to make sure this is complete.
Yep. And I just remember before doing that, everything that connected would connect from, I don't remember the exact term, but it was like the .NET framework or something like that, rather than an application name. So yeah, definitely a good practice there that he's brought up.
Yeah, so I guess I am interested. So compañeros, if you're using a Resource Governor, I'd love to hear from you. It seems like there are lots of potential good upsides and how you've been able to kind of get over the learning hump. Of course, we did talk about an enterprise-only feature, but would be interested in getting some feedback there.
Yep. In experience, I've come across a couple of times where I really wanted to use Resource Governor,
Right.
And then I discovered, that system is only on standard edition. Therefore, we're not able to use it.
Right.
But who knows? Maybe in the future.
Maybe in the future.
Yep.
So our music for SQL Server in the News is by Mansardian, used under Creative Commons. I think that's going to do it for us today. Of course, you can reach out to us on Twitter. I am at Carlos L. Chacon.
And I am at SQL EMT. And we'll see you on the SQL Trail.
SQL Data Partners.